we go. Hi, Mandy.
Hi, nice to see you.
Good to see you. So we're just getting ourselves into the group, and I'm just going to make sure we're in, which we are, and give people a chance to come and join us. But it's great to see you. So thanks for coming along and spending some time.
Yeah.
So before we start, then, Mandy, give us a little overview of your many different strands that you're bringing to the conversation today, and a little bit about you as well.
Okay, so currently I live in Somerset. Previous to that, I lived in Staffordshire. I'm a lifelong dog guardian. My first dog was, I know, it's 5 years old, and I've had around 20 dogs, so of all sorts of sizes and shapes and characters and what have you. I have 3 children, and they came with their own challenges. And I'm grandma to 5 children now, 3 of which live very close to me. For 34 years, I was a teacher of very young children, specialising in early years. My training was in child development from birth to 7 to 9 years old. And my favourite bit is the nursery reception-y age, because of how amazing their learning is. I was a head teacher for 10 years. My head teachering was in an infant and nursery school in an area of quite considerable difficulty. So we had way more than the average children who were on the child protection registers in care and had significant special needs. We were an all-access school, which meant that no child was ever refused a place. So every single child that asked for it got it, which meant we had a bit of a skew of our special needs because we were noted for it, and so we would get requests from all over the area, and children with all types of needs, and it was an absolute privilege. I adored it. And when I retired early, and when I retired, I was guardian to a very tricky dog. Well, not, he wasn't tricky, that's awful. He had challenges in his life. He had a single event which took him from being gorgeous, fluffy, happy 2-year-old into a quivering mess. And for the rest of his life, he was deeply anxious and had reactive behaviours. And he taught me so much. And so I got support for him. I went down a holistic route because I didn't know animal therapy existed, and got interested and then got hooked. And so I was an animal therapist. And in working as a therapist, I realised that I needed to know more about behaviour. So I then studied and accredited with the IMDT and became a trainer and a therapist together. And that's my favourite thing to do, is to integrate the two. So I'm just a bit of a behaviour geek now, and my behaviour geeking includes my grandson, who is 4 years old and is autistic. He's actually hyperlexic, which means that from the age of maybe 18 months, we think, he was able to read, but he didn't start speaking till he was 3. And he has informed my understanding about learning with regard to my dogs, and particularly my younger dog, Ronnie, who is 2. So he and Forrest are growing up together, and to see the way that each of them learns, particularly when Forrest was not speaking, is just fascinating. And I think that's probably why I end up being here today, having this conversation with you and whoever else is listening.
Well, we've spoken many times, haven't we, Mandy? We've shared quite a few conversations, and that's why I wanted us to have a chat today. And quite often there's been a lot with a lot of the conversations that are going on recently about looking at and referencing from early childhood educational development. Mm-hmm. And I know even from some of the comments I see even in the group where people are saying, well, why are we going on about dogs and kids? Because dogs aren't kids. And of course they're not. But there is a lot for us to learn, for sure, about the processes, the priorities, and the lessons that we can learn from the failings of the human child's educational experience, I think, when we start thinking about dogs. And it's interesting you mentioned there about your grandson. We've talked before, off air, about how his ability to read happened very young, but his ability to talk came later. But the pressure on parents that somehow the child must have done a certain thing at a certain point in development, and if they're not, then somehow there's something wrong, without thinking about that particular child's own input into that process, or their own focus, if you like, might be very different.
Absolutely. And in school or in child development, we're looking at, we should be looking at the whole child, the whole environment, and also particularly looking at them as unique beings. And I think that's where the comparisons can be made between dog development or concept development and child concept development, in that everyone is unique and they all work at a different level at different times, and there's spikes and plateaus. But in essence, they are still exploring their world and still experimenting within their world and still trying stuff out. And we hear that, don't we, with puppies? He's chewing my shoes again. He keeps going back to the same slipper. He still chews the same chair leg. And that's all to do with the way that he's building this picture of the world. He's learning, and he can learn whether or not we teach him. And I think that's a bit of a thing that we have to remember, that all beings, and that's all beings, are learning whether or not they're taught. And I think the thing also we have to think about is that dogs have been in our families for all these millennia, which we know and we talk about. We talk about the evolution and how they come together and how we share our homes. And I think particularly in the last, certainly from my experience, in the last really 10, 20 years, that's changed. That's taken a massive leap forward. And our dogs are evolving to be these family members. And I think that they absorb us into their families as much as the other way round. And therefore you've got to have this understanding that there's a developmental thing going on that's similar. Does that make sense? No,
it does completely. And I think what I'm hearing you saying there is this notion that there is a big difference between what we are taught and what we learn.
Yeah.
And when we think about the big shifts in focus and emphasis in child educational development, again, over the last 20 years or so, especially things that you saw going through your time in that system and having to manage that system, actually, especially when you had a major cohort of students who didn't fit necessarily a curriculum-based model. And I think that's something I want us to unpack a little bit here, because I want to come on to the, my brain always goes a bit nuts when I speak to you, Mandy, but I want us to look on the different kind of, the different differences between learning and coaching and training and that kind of thing. I want us to look at that, and we'll come on to that in a second. But one of the big things that we can learn from the child educational development is the difference between the expectational elements and criteria-led structured learning and the actual learning experience of the individual. So that's in this case the child, but it's equally the same for the dog. And the importance of, and the lack of availability for, sometimes, the experimental learning that actually has most use to the young juvenile. And again, we can make those connections again, can't we, between children and dogs? I think
like the way you use juvenile, and maybe we should do that because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about infants or juveniles or very young learners. I just prefer to call them learners, to be honest. And you're absolutely right. So I trained in the 1970s, and the term then was progressive education, and it was all built around exploration and experimental learning with the behaviorists of the time. The Piagets, Vygotskis and Brunner were very much my area of behaviorism. Actually, it's not behaviorism, but constructivism. was the behavioural hook that we hung our work on. And actually Skinner and Pavlov were there very much as a bit of a circus thing, you know, just in the background. You know what, these guys did this with rats and it made us think that, but actually it's not really, it doesn't really guide us. What really guides us is this other model. So my model was this constructive model, and this model of child-led or learner-led learning, and the teacher being the person who was there and understood the needs of that learner. And that's, when I say the needs of them, I mean all their needs. So we're not just talking about the academic or cognitive needs, as it were, but we're talking about their emotional needs, their in a sense, their epigenetic needs. So my children in the school that I was head at came from, you know, on a daily basis, a third of them would come from a household that was, they probably had drug dealers in and out of their house all evening. There would have been fights. There would absolutely, because I went and visited, there would absolutely be weed smells coming through the walls and under the doors. They probably haven't been fed. I personally breakfasted around 20 children of 180 every single day. So we're not talking about just the baseline of the learners, what the learners just know, their prior learning. We're talking about all that other stuff as well. So safety is really important. And I know, you know, when we talk about dog learning, we talk about safety more and more these days, and that safety is internal to that being. So what's safe for one learner can be super unsafe for another, and that can be due to prior experiences, or it can be due to breeding. Because even with my children, I had children in my school where their parents actually were traumatized and they had got this history running through, which I'm sure from your own and anybody who's worked with children in social care or whatever, you get these family runs, and it's historical. It's that trauma has been led through and informs the trauma of the next generation. And so I've got parents in the same position. And so that safety is internal safety. It's the safety they've come out of that morning or the night before or during the holidays. But it's also the safety of learning, because if the learner feels that they can't, they're going to fail, or they don't understand, or they can't engage in what's being asked of them, then that's unsafe. And the primary need of a learner is to feel safe in order to. And I think that sometimes, without knowing, we impact that feeling of safety by too much pressure to achieve a criteria that means nothing to the learner. So to learn, you have to have some sort of motivation. It has to have some sort of meaning, and has to be relatable, so that they can take it on board and manage it and develop it. If it hasn't got any meaning, then it can't be learned. So I will give you a very prime example. I have a massive problem with maths. I'm amazing at adding up, taking away, multiplied, dividing. No problem there. I was a waitress and a barmaid. You get really good at it. And I taught it, obviously. I couldn't begin to tell you anything about trigonometry because I didn't understand it. It scared me. And I had personal tutoring, and I still could not get past it. When the tutor was there guiding me, I could complete it. When I went off to myself, I couldn't do it. And that was all fear-based, because I didn't understand it. And it made no sense to me. At that point in my life, I was going to be a vet, so I did need maths, but I couldn't see where trigonometry was coming into my veterinary practice. I didn't become a vet. I went down a teaching route, but it still had no value for me at all. And yet we ask of our learners invaluable stuff. And I think we spoke before about how these criteria are set, and for schools they're set nationally, and they're set outside the needs of the learner that is in front of you. So you have a set of criteria, and those criteria say that at a particular age or a particular stage, this knowledge should be able to be replicated or tested or shown. And the children in my school, that was never going to happen, because they came in with such a low base. Many of them had hardly any language, a spoken language, and what language they did have was very stilted. Many of them in nappies, so they didn't have social skills. They their behave they were unsafe, so their behavior was always not always, was often challenging, because they were putting that safety net around them, because they didn't want to feel unsafe. So it was our job to make sure they felt safe enough to take the block out of their brain in order to understand something. And then we were coming along and asking them to do something that was unrelatable to their everyday experience, because their emotional experience overrode the ridiculousness of I'm just trying to think of something in the lockdown fronted of adverbial. That wasn't part of my infant stuff, but it's the same thing. You know, why is it important to be able to understand the difference in a grapheme, the written sound for f can be a ph, or it can be an f, or it can be a double f. Why is that really important when you haven't had any breakfast?
That's a powerful thing to say, and I think we're setting up those stories are just a really good example of how that kind of arbitrary criteria-led notion of what's progress or success is automatically and fundamentally is failing before anybody even starts.
It's exclusive. It's exclusive, and if you want me to transfer that, you know, people are listening and going, yeah, right, these are small children in a small area of Midlands, UK. In classes, or in the work that I do on my one-to-ones, we see, and I'll give you a prime example. Actually, I helped out a friend with a puppy school, and we had she was older than a puppy, because she had just arrived from Romania. Gorgeous girl, and we were taking her through it's basically the IMDT, which is the same as the Kennel Club things. Basic skills, so sit, down, stay, walk nicely on a lead, don't jump up, all those things, be able to stay while I count to 10, walk 10 paces away, all that stuff. And some of our puppies were awesome at it, you know, they just got it straight away. This little girl, actually, it took her 3 weeks to get from 100 meters away, because she was too freaked out by the dogs that were there, that were perfectly happy looking at their people doing their thing. But she couldn't do that. She just wasn't ready. So do you know what we did? We gave her a big space to go sniffing that was way away from anywhere else. And that's what she did. Her guardian was amazing and bought into it. And I said, you know, we're just going to have her do stuff slowly. This is what we're doing. You know, we need her to sit if she's going to pass these criteria, because it was a criteria-led class. I'm not knocking it. It was. And they took that all on board. But why should she sit? Why should this little girl want to sit when she's in a field, in a totally alien environment with alien stuff going on around her? It's near to a motorway, so that may have triggered her somehow. We just don't know, do we? Why should she repeatedly sit or walk very nicely on her lead looking at her guardian at that moment? Now, we could have said, and she barked a lot, so we could have said, you know what, she's barking a lot, she can't come to this class. It was in a field, thank goodness. We could have said that. We could have said she's not ready for this, or she's not good at it, or actually she needs specialist whatever. And she did need specialist whatever, but what she needed more than anything else was 3 to 6 months to be herself.
Yeah.
before she ever got there. And that, you know, Kathy Gregory's work, I'm a big fan of Kathy recently. If you're out there, Kathy, you're listening, you've changed, you're added to my knowledge. But the stuff that Kathy talks about, this stand back, let it be, let it be. And we learned to do that with our children. So we learned to go, do you know what? You haven't had any breakfast for 3 days. Might not have had anything to eat for 3 days. So do you know what? You just sit here, I'll get you some Lego. And when we're ready, we're just going to pop over to the classroom and you can sit and you can absorb. But I'm not going to ask you to do anything today, because we needed them to feel safe and that there was no pressure. So what that meant for some children, and as I say, over a third of them, was that they learned to be safe. They learned that to trust. They learned how to cooperate with others and learn from others, whether that was adults or whether it was other children. Their parents learned that it was safe. So their parents were okay coming into school. We brought them into their own lessons. So we would set up fun stuff to do where they would learn alongside their children or their children alongside them. Informally, there was never any judgment. And bit by bit it changed. And the ethos was caring and loving. And we had children who were amazing. But what happened was that we only had our children till they were 7. And it takes a long time to get that trust. You know, if we're talking 6 months to a year for a rescue dog, for instance, then we're going to easily take that for a traumatized child. So we had these children who became learners, who wanted to learn because it made sense to them, and their parents were supporting them. But we only had them till they were 7. Then they went to our partner junior school, and the same families went through both schools. And the junior school began to get these amazing SATs results at Key Stage 2. Really amazing results. Fabulous head teacher, great leader. Same families. Our results were not so great because we had got a baseline that was way below the expectation. That's this standardized, you will at 7 years old, you will be able to whatever, or at 5 years old, you will be able to do whatever. And a lot of these children were never going to meet that ever, because not with us. And so our standards of attainment different to standards of achievement. I don't know, do you want me to explain the difference? Because I don't know that
yes, because that's important, I think, because this is again another principle that's relevant for when we think about what we do with teaching of dogs, I think.
And it's about progress. So a standard of attainment is how you score, fair, whatever, achieve, compared to a standardized goal. So if it is sit and hold it for 10 seconds and you do that, you have attained that goal, irrespective. Achievement is from a baseline. So it's the movement from that baseline to where you are right now. So we take my Romanian rescue. She came from being unable really to think. And after her 6 weeks, she could sit when she was asked to, but her bottom hit the floor and she looked, and then she had to stand up again because sitting was a bit scary for her. But what she had achieved in those 6 weeks was enormous, but she hadn't attained the criteria that was expected of her. Her achievement was way outside the dog that came already able to sit because had a breeder who did Mandy, you know. And if you've had a breeder that has taught or enabled the dogs to learn that when you stand in front of them, their bottom hits the floor, then you've got a dog that sits automatically. They will have attained at the level you want, but you haven't actually put any work in, and neither has that dog or child. Massive.
I think that attainment is I talk a lot about getting stuck in task, having a very task-focused, task-oriented, and that fits into that attainment thing. Is about, and I love that because, you know, for many of the dogs that you and I see, the fact that they've turned up to that learning space is an achievement for many of these dogs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I go back to this little dog because it was so stark to me, and she was my absolute joy. I was part of we had a bigger group, and there were 2 trainers, and she was I was her teaching assistant equivalent. And so I just, kept an eye on her and coached through her amazing guardians and helped them to not feel so bad because she was screaming at the end of the lead when these perfect dogs were sitting and staying for however long. But yeah, we need to value all their learning, and it needs to be valuable to them. They need to see a purpose in it. And I think that's part of it. And there isn't necessarily a purpose in this task-driven stuff. And I do have a problem with it, and I haven't made a secret of that. And it's only the last year that I felt safe that people would understand it. At first, I questioned it a lot, and I got shot down by some quite major people, to be honest, or people who I considered major at the time. And I shot it down because, to me, operant and classical, as I sort of alluded to before, isn't properly true learning. It's task oriented. It's an outcome driven, and the outcome is driven by the trainer or the teacher, whereas most teachers and coaches wouldn't look at that outcome as that task outcome. So I struggle with task outcome stuff, and it's one of the reasons I no longer do classes, because I found it really hard when I'd got this mix of different needs of both the guardians in different places and the dogs in different places, and trying to have a set curriculum. So that's why I only do one-to-ones, and there's no curriculum anymore, because we start with the learner, and that learner is human and dog, of course. So we start with the learner, and we need to do that. We need to get away from this. We need to get beyond this operant, because it serves its purpose. Don't get me wrong, it's useful, but to me, it isn't proper learning, not true learning.
So so already, right, you've touched on so many things that really highlight, for anybody who is unsure about why we would think about looking at what's going on in child educational psychology or development. There's tons of stuff that is completely transferable. The biggest thing that you've talked about there is for the learner to feel safe, and for the learner to be in a position to learn. And a lot of that comes down to the primary caregiver. And I think one of the things that's been lost by having a very criteria-based, kind of task-focused push is that the dog owner, guardian, caregiver doesn't know about some of the primary things, the foundational things that they should be looking at. They've been persuaded that the most important thing is an obedient dog. The most important thing is training. And then everything becomes a training issue. So if the dog won't do something, it's now a training issue. So we end up with some dogs who find that learning experience even more stressful. And this really shines a light now, if ever we needed more of one. But of course, we know a lot already about the training that is done in an aversive way for these young dogs. Because so this is really important. And so let's have a think then.
I just sort of add something, Andy, that you were just talking about how when we think about training that's done in an aversive way, and how that doesn't, that puts the learner into an unsafe place. Aversion, as we know, is learner driven. And so sometimes we can be, in the kindest way, aversive if the outcome is us driven, is guardian driven, or teacher driven, trainer driven, because like you said, we need to work on the dog child foundation. We need to make sure that all that stuff's in place first, and I actually my program for my one-to-ones, the first 3 weeks are called foundations, and not once is there any operant work, not once in 3 weeks. What I do have in week 6, if you like, is a dog who's walking nicely and a dog who will respond to a cue, but the cue bit isn't what I'm there to work with. I'm there to work with the relationship between the guardian and the animal, and actually to build the understanding from the guardian of what the animal, their dog, not any dog, but their specific dog. So their specific dog will have different communications, and will have a different understanding of the communication that the guardians in that household are giving them. And we talk about language. So we use language to ask things of our dogs, or tell them, depending which way you look at it. I like to ask and give them the option to say no thanks, because if they say no thanks, that means that it hasn't got enough importance for them, and either I need to drive that importance a little bit more because it's important, like waiting at a curb, because I don't want my dog at the end of the lead that's nice and loose to be belting out into a road. You know, that's an important learning thing, and I, as the knowledgeable other, have to guide that. But by the same token, I need to make sure that I've got dogs that understand their guardian, and that their guardian understands. So they need to be able to read them. So we've only just really started getting heavy into canine body language and communication, because it's more than body language, it's communication. And our dogs understand so much of English words. And but going back to Kathy and others, this conversational style of working alongside your dog, just as you would a toddler, by chatting stuff through. And chatting stuff through gains an understanding from the dog, so that they don't understand that sentence at all. You know, they don't understand the individual parts of the phrase or sentence you've used. What they understand is the tone of voice, the body language, the where that phrase or parts of that phrase have been used previously, and start to make those connections, those classical and operant connections. And I think if we only go to sit, stay, and that's all we're doing is we're demanding stuff, that's not actually valuing our dogs with us. Have I gone off a tangent?
No, because I'm going to say that, because this is really important, because I would invite anybody who's got an older dog, say older, you know, maybe 4 or 5 and plus, who's been around a bit and kind of knows their way around. And I think about our two, Harley and Arthur, who are older. If you think about your own dog who's a bit older and how much they understand about what you need from them, only a very small bit of that would be stuff that you've taught structurally. So, you know, if I say, right, I don't know why I'm going to whisper it, because then I'm going to remember. If I said right then, I always do whisper it, because I have a habit of saying that. So as soon as I say right then, the dogs think, hang on, it's kind of that time for us to go for a WALK. So they just connect all the time to these different things. And, you know, I always, even with things like putting on their harnesses and stuff, I've never done any specific training about what the word harness is, but they know what it is and they know what I'm doing. So I totally get that. And Kathy's obviously amazing with her work in really promoting this way of us having more of being part of that experimental learning journey for our dogs.
Yeah, absolutely.
The structure stuff's important as well. And like sometimes with these kind of discussions, some people see it as being kind of anti-training and anti this. It's not anti-anything really. It's just recognizing that, like you've said, a lot of the things we might teach may have little internal value to the learner. And that's what we've got to recognize. And especially if some of the learning process is actually stopping them from learning things that would be important to them, and especially in that first 12 months, you know, for a dog, from a dog point of view.
Yeah, and all because learning is, I think you said before, you can learn without being taught, and you can teach and no learning happens. We've all had teachers in our growing up that we would say, oh, I didn't learn anything from them. I switched off after 5 minutes and spent 2 years learning nothing about history. And that's because you did not connect with that teacher, or that teacher was not teaching you in the way that you needed to receive that learning or to buy into the learning. and we could go off on learning styles and what have you for humans. I don't think that's appropriate for dogs, to be honest. I think we have dogs that learn in different ways for sure, but the learning style thing is just perhaps not, it isn't appropriate. It's one of those not appropriate things. However,
but I was going to say, it is a problem. We won't talk about that, but it is appropriate though for people to learn more about that, because we're supporting the humans.
The humans, yeah, absolutely.
And they will have a different learning style, won't they?
Completely, and all the things we've talked about safety and about understand is as important for the human, because learning is learning. But there's a difference between teaching, and there's a difference between training, and a difference between coaching, and different learning occurs under those different circumstances.
Can we look at that now then? Because I think that's really, really important. I think this is going to be really interesting for everybody. So yeah, if we could take us through then. I mean,
it's a massive topic, and I'm going to have to really, so I apologize for anyone who's a teacher out there, or has got really good understanding of this, or has done child development work or whatever, or therapy work, whatever it is. I've got some notes because I don't want to lose anything out. So if I'm looking down, it's because I want to make sure I get this, I don't miss anything out, particularly. So training is skills based. Okay, so that fits in really nicely with what we think of as training. So think about your basic puppy class, for instance. It's about repetition. So the skill is introduced, it's modeled, it's guided, but it's guided by the trainer. And it requires lots of practice. How you get there is different. That's where your sort of operant conditioning and your works and your reinforcers and so on. It's there to form actions, and it's assessed to a specific criteria. So when you're training, you're looking at very specific criteria that you're moving the learner towards attaining. The achievement doesn't matter as such, because all you're doing is wanting this outcome. So trainers are looking at outcome-led. It's sort of drill-based, instruction-based. Okay, so that fits really nicely, and it's a really good description of what your average puppy class is for both the humans and the dogs. We're going to guide you through these exercises and practice them till you get it right, and then you've got something that we're going to measure you against. So that's training, or to train, or being trained, or a trainer. Teaching is very similar, but it's much more knowledge-based, and teachers come in different guises and different skill sets. So you've got I was going to say history teacher, because I had a really bad history teacher. So I'm really sorry, amazing history teachers, because I know there must be some out there. But if you're a history teacher who knows their stuff and stands up and has your whiteboard on and takes you through a million slides that tell you about the Napoleonic War, but actually I'm not interested in the Napoleonic War at all, I'm not going to learn anything, but the teacher is imparting knowledge to me. So it's about instilling or imparting knowledge and understanding. The understanding bit is the bit for the learner, because only the learner can get the understanding bit. Same with a skill, but pretty much if you practice enough, you can create a skill because it becomes muscle memory. So for sitting, a dog to sit, it's muscle memory of, I've practiced this. When I hear that word or I have that cue, my body feels like this in time and space. So my bottom's on the floor, my legs are out, my paws are in front of my shoulders, blah, blah, blah. So to teach, there's a demonstrating in there, and there's a discussion, and there's a transaction of sharing information. You're setting up learning experiences, and that's really important, to set up these experiences that the learner will engage in, which is different to training, because we're not doing that in your average puppy class. Some of us are, some of us definitely are, but if you take your average sit, stay down puppy class, that isn't necessarily setting up those learning experiences. We're drilling rather than enabling learning.
I want to pause on that, because I just think it's worth repeating again and highlighting, because I love that language, the kind of setting up for a learning experience. And good teaching ultimately, say, if the teaching kind of connection is right, it becomes a cooperative act.
It has to be.
Yeah. And I think that's really, when I think about amazing people like Helen Moore and Lucy Alders and others like yourself, who are doing things differently within the kind of the class or the one-to-ones or whatever it is that you're looking at. It is that thing. I just love it, Mandy. This thing about setting up a good learning experience.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of really focus in on that for those listening, because I think that's something we can't miss in that dialogue.
No, and there are some amazing, I have a good friend, and I'm not going to name her because she'd be really embarrassed, I think, or maybe not. But she trained we have similar kind of dogs. We trained at the same time, and so we've been through the same experience together. She's done different types of things to me. She's very much an ACE person. She's got a space that she trains in, and free work is just embedded into it, and she is teaching, not training. Part of her business is called Train, and it actually is way more than training. She sets up learning experiences, and over a few days, so this is giving you a clue if anybody knows her, over a few days she can move or enable these dogs and their families to move from one place of understanding to a different. Her achievements are huge, and I know that because she's worked with a friend of mine. And so that's what we're looking for, is this setting up this learning, but it's unique to the learner, which is why I love my one-to-ones, because once you've unpicked what the family need and the dog needs and where they are in their own learning journey, you can then put the two together, and they become this cooperative thing. So I love working with children. So one of my big things is that I grow family dogs. That's one of my courses, is grow your own family dog, because that's what you're going to do. You're all going to grow together. And it is really, the cooperation thing is really important. And that's perhaps where the learning theory comes from my teaching, comes from differently. So in a cooperation and setting up learning experiences, we would draw on a different set of learning theorists, and we would look at that constructivist model. So that constructivist model says that the learner constructs their knowledge and understanding and guides it, but they can't do that alone, because they need someone else to help them that has more knowledge, so that we can start to guide them through that. Where their learning is their own chosen learning, that makes it motivating and intrinsically rewarding. We don't need to reward a dog who is learning, in my case, learning how to find the chicken wrappers out of the recycling, even when I've put 2 boots on top of it, so it's not found. That's intrinsically rewarding for him, because I've worked really hard on him sniffing out stuff, and he's damn good at it now, because that's so rewarding for him. I don't have to reward him for doing things like that. He does it of his own accord, and he loves scatter feeding, so he gets really excited if he finds a lost bit of kibble on the grass. That's motivating him, but we have to learn how to do it. But it also needs to be transferable. So for me, true learners, and that includes dogs, are ones that can transfer the knowledge and understanding and skills to a different place. So we talk a lot about dogs not being able to generalize really well, and I'm not so sure. I think that when their learning is their own, they can generalize it and they can take it somewhere else. When they've been trained, there's not any intrinsic stuff in there. They're just repeating an action that's attached to a word. And then, because it's in time and space, that action is in time and space. It's not the same space. The space in my kitchen isn't the same space as my park. You know, there's different stuff there. How are they supposed to know? So we do have to practice it in different places. However, as an example, I have Tibetan Terriers. They are known for their jumping abilities. They can jump from a stand they can jump 4 legs in the air like a spring from the floor onto a table, or in my young dog Ronnie's case, he can do that onto a window ledge and not be out of balance. So we say, as Tibetan Terrier owners, never ever allow your dog to learn how to jump, because they can transfer that pretty much anywhere. So if he needs to get an apple out of the fruit bowl, even if I've blocked the way, he will jump over it because he knows how to do that. So he's transferred that understanding of I can jump onto surfaces to pretty much any surface because it means something to him. And I can ask him to jump onto a surface in different places just by saying hop up, and I've not taught him hop up as doing it because he does it himself. But he knows that if I click my fingers, he'll just go up. Oh, that's another place for me to jump. So I think they do generalize, and that transference of an understanding and knowledge and skills happens, but it happens when there's been what I call true learning. So the true learning is through exploration, experimentation, trying things out. There's all that repetition is still in there. So as a child example, I found a video the other day of Forrest, because he fascinated me because he learned differently. He challenged my understanding of child development because he has developed in a totally unorganized way. And as I say, he didn't have any spoken language till he was 3 years old. But as a young child, about 9 months old, he found a thread in the carpet, and we need to just talk about sensory stuff in a second. He found a thread in the carpet and he pulled it up and let it go, and he pulled it up and let it go, and he did that for about 20 minutes. He found that thread another day from a different direction and pulled it again. And he would do that. He had a little ball with a duck in, and he experimented with this ball to find different ways to make the duck move. Remember, he's sort of 6 to 9 months old. No language to talk about it, but he was doing quite complex scientific experiments to do with moving something. Just utterly fascinating. And then he would go away, process it, and he would come back and he would try something else. And isn't that just what our young puppies do? Our young dogs do? They go and practice with something, and then they go away and think about it, and then they'll come back and they'll do it something with it a different way. And we laugh at them. So they'll play tug one way, or they'll get a toy out of the box and throw it in the air and get super excited that they've been able to do that. So they'll practice it again and again and again. That toy then becomes a really important toy because they've been able to learn about what it does themselves. So like the giggle balls and those dispensing toys are so popular because they're able to find stuff out for themselves, and it makes it important for them.
And that's really important, because how often when we think about, well, obviously I've gone through this with Molly recently, she's 12 months old now, but we really just step back and try to create those safe learning experiences for her. Yeah. And there was a lot of stuff Kieran said to me when she hadn't been with us very long, but obviously Kieran, he was on the same learning journey as I, but he said, without knowing what he knows now, he remembered the young dog he had when he was growing up and how often that dog would have been seen as being silly or naughty or told off or have it taken off them. All those kind of learning experiences that are going on there. And how important they are. And I think you're right about the generalization, because when you think about a dog who ends up finding value in things, becoming well regulated because of those life experiences, then something can come along that isn't the same as something else, but they can deal with it more widely and more broadly. So there is an element of generalization there for that. We get stuck in thinking about things with that criteria-led, opera-minded view of what's going on for the dog.
And I think we also, if we stick with those theories, which were always meant as observational ones, they were never meant to drive the learning, to plan the learning. They were always meant as an observation of what's
going on,
rather than planning for it. And planning is really important. So if you're going to have If you're going to set up experiences, you have to plan. And that was another thing that really surprised me, was to do with planning. So we do see, you know, you do get the when you're doing training, you get you need to plan a lesson. But the way that the lessons were planned actually were just notes. It wasn't planning at all.
Yeah.
Because planning requires assessment, and it requires it ongoing, and then you have to be able to adjust for that for your learner. So you can't have this criteria. If you've just got this one criteria, this one thing that's like sit for 5 minutes or sit for a count of 10 at 10 paces, whatever. You can't have that just as an outcome. So if you take my little Romanian puppy again, we chunked it right down into tiny bits. I just wanted her to be in the field and not bark, really. So that was my plan. I assessed her. I looked when she came in the field and said, you know what, today you can do this. You're going to be okay. We're going to ask you to do a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. It wasn't about her sitting at 10 paces for 10 seconds. It was about, here you are now, and this is where we'd really like you to get. It's not an end result. It's just, this is our optimistic view of what we might be able to achieve. And it's my job to guide you from one section to the other. And that comes from the work, this constructivist work, where we need to look at the learner, where they are, assess it, know what we need, where we need to get, plan for it, taking in the learner's needs, offer it, support it, assess where you've got to, and adjust. So you either adjust, sometimes you adjust and go, whoa, you've done really well. Had a lady in the park the other day, and for all sorts of reasons, she's amazing. And her dog that she was walking, that she was learning to walk on a lead, dog had never been on a lead, had made this, she'd worked, I haven't done any practice. I said, that's okay, we'll just do it. And we were doing the sort of 300 pecky type of thing, but I was giving them both of them the opportunity to do it together. So they were learning from each other. And we started off with pattern games, actually. So we were just doing pattern games in all sorts of different ways, so that we were building that relationship, that foundation stuff. But really quickly, Myrtle's like, oh, I get it now. In that session, she got what she hadn't got the last 3, because she wasn't ready at that point. And we just had practiced her looking at her owner, really, basically. And she got it. And she went from hanging off the end of the lead to walking halfway across the park with a verbal good girl. And that's a massive leap. Now I could have said, right, you need to take 300 peck thing, right, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps. I could have kept with that, but I didn't need to. And if I'd had that as my goal, if I'd had that, this is what we're going to do. My plan is we're going to do this, 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 and this, and this. But because I was able to assess her partway through and go, do you know what? You don't need to do this anymore. We're all done. You just need to do this. And I changed the way that we were offering this to Myrtle, because this was suiting her better. So she had worked through, the pair of them had worked through what worked for them, the tool that worked for them at that moment. And she didn't really give 2 hoots about the kibble that we had been doing, because it's more traditional. And it gives us some sort of baseline. All she wanted was her guardian to go, well done. That meant more than anything in the whole world to her. So as long as her guardian was giving her, come on, we're walking along the park, and I gave them the conversational model. So it's, come on, we'll walk along the park, we're going to get to the next tree. And when we get to the next tree, we're going to go and try and get to the next tree. Get to the tree. Didn't we do well? We're going to go to the next tree now. So they've got this chat going on. And the dog was just beside herself. And yet I could have done all the usual typed thing, but because we were able to assess, it makes such a difference. And I don't think we assess enough. And that's a skill, and it's observation. We're getting better observation, but we need to observe our dogs better. And I do a lot of teaching of observation with my guardians of their dog, so that they can learn more about their dog. And that isn't just sort of visual observations, it's observations over time.
Mm.
So what's his favorite toy? How does he play when he plays with each of the children? Is it the same? What's the things that bother you, and why do they bother you? Why is he doing this? So just tell me why he's doing this. And when they've unpicked that observation, oh, he always does it at this particular time, and why is that bothering you? Because at that particular time I need to do something else. It's like, right, okay, but he needs to do this at this time, so what are we going to do about it? And that's where you have that negotiation come in, and you're working to meet both your needs. Of course, we can't have dogs running around the house any more than we have toddlers running around the house. There has to be a boundary, but we can't top down it. And you know, we've talked about top downing before. We can't keep top downing because we're suppressing the learning of our animals. And if you let them be, they're pretty awesome. Their learning is pretty awesome. I didn't do any formal training with Ronnie really, other than have him sit at a curb because I didn't want him rushing forward, because he walks with my husband who has a stick, and I needed him. There's certain things you need them to be able to do by request. Everything else is negotiated, you know.
And I love that invitational style. It's kind of like, you know, what should we learn and how should we learn it?
Yeah, and that's exactly what we would do with children. So for very young children, you know, long ago we used to do what was called plan, do, review with 3-year-olds. So we'd say, okay, this is the water. What are we going to do with this water? So it's like, oh, I'm going to put stones in it. Okay, so we'll put stones in it. So as the teacher, I'd go, this is awesome. We're now going to do some science, because we're going to get that whole idea of observation and making predictions. So in my head, I've got all my criteria. My learners have gone, we're going to chuck stones in a bowl of water. So what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? So you'd start to ask those questions, exactly as Henrietta did with Myrtle. What should we do next? Shall we do this? Are we going to do that? Would you like to? And Kathy talks about asking Wolfie which way he wants to go. And we've done a little bit more of that recently. Which way do you want to go on your walk today? Oh, okay, well, we'll go through the field, or we'll go through the park. If you do that, they really do choose different places every day. My friend did that with her dog the other day, and he took her to the vet because the vet has the best treats. Absolutely true story.
It's amazing how many times, if you ask a dog, what do you want? I'll give you a clue, actually.
Yeah.
Mandy, that's amazing. So I can't believe it. We've
know.
Gone round. There's a lot of other stuff. So I think we might have a Mandy part 2. And looking at the comments in the group, then I think that would be very much celebrated if we had a Mandy part 2. So this has been great today, and I really wanted an opportunity for us to, you know, just to kind of allow ourselves to think about where some of those similarities are between educational models and what we can learn and take away. But yeah, it'd be a shame if, as the dog community, we just ended up making all the same mistakes that have gone on in other learning environments.
I think, going back to where you really started, I think there's a misunderstanding about anthropomorphism. And I think the more we learn about the emotional experience of dogs scientifically, you know, with the work with Gregory Byrne and so on and so many more now, Kathy, the work that we, you know, the insights that Kathy Murphy gives us, we can, and the more we observe our dogs and understand them, the more we can see that actually they are sentient beings that have feelings, and their behavior is an example of the way that they feel. Well, actually, that's what we do when we say, oh my goodness, that dog is looking really sad, or we know they're looking really sad because their ears are back or whatever. It isn't about saying he's sad because if I was him, I would be sad because somebody's taken away his slipper. That's anthropomorphizing. But I think we've got to have a better understanding of actually how they're feeling and what they're doing, and allow ourselves to a little bit, and not question, you know, every time we say a child or a human and a dog learner are totally different. They are, but actually they work the same kind of way because they're mammals and their brains are similar, and they've had this similar evolutionary upbringing together. It's got to be that connection.
Anthropomorphism is in itself a bit of an odd one, in as far as one of the big things we're thinking about now is moving away from this notion of the dogs do this, the dog do that, because it's like, well, who are the dogs? Because they've got an individual dog who's unique. The same for humans, right? So if I was to say anything, I'm not really necessarily anthropomorphizing, I'm andiphizing, whatever, making a word up, because I'm just projecting my own thoughts and feelings on another, whether it's a dog, a cat, or a Mandy. But that's all I can do. And this is why I love talking about the emotional experience and trying to connect through it. You were talking really eloquently earlier about connecting through the learning experience as part of the wider emotional experience of the caregiver and the dog, with that example you were giving about finding that way that suited both of them. Amazing talk tonight, Mandy. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you, everybody, for the...
Obviously I can't see any comments. I'll happily go through them and answer any questions there. If anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'm going to say just, and I ought not to say just. I'm a teacher by trade and learning, and now a trainer, come teacher, come coach, come whatever. And there are other people who have different understanding and more understanding in different places, but I'm more than happy to share what I know if anybody wants to ask.
That's important, because this whole process for me is the democratization of this, because all voices and angles are valid, and we've got to pull all the different strands that people offer, and you offer a very rich vein there of experience and professional expertise, and I really thank you for sharing that with us today. Where can people find out more about your kind of work, your doggy professional work?
So I have a page, so if you do the usual Facebook thing, so it's at Peaceful Paws Therapy. One word, that will just, oh no, sorry, that's wrong. At Peaceful Paws Holistic Therapy, that should pop it up. Webpage, Peaceful Paws Therapy, www. I can put it in the commenty things, or I'll put some links up into the group.
Yeah, please do.
The webpage is basic-ish, because I'm doing rather than writing about it. I tend to, the Facebook group page, I've got a group as well, but the page tends to be the one I use more often because it's more public-y, and that's often curated stuff that really interests me, with a bit of a Mandy comment slant on it. But anybody can write to me on there or share stuff on there or whatever. It's open.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I'd definitely love to have you back, Mandy, and it's great. And I'm going to get a chance to meet you soon, of course, in person.
Yes, very soon.
Really exciting.
Yeah.
Just a quick one in the group. Some of you may know if you're on my private line, but my private Facebook, but one of my dogs has got to go in for an operation next week, quite a big one, and I'm going to take some time out to look after him. So some of the Facebook lives we had lined up, we're going to put on hold just for a few weeks, but they will be rescheduled. So and that's that. Well, great. Thanks, Mandy, and thanks everybody for tuning in tonight, and we'll speak soon. Oh, one last thing, I nearly forgot. We do have Robert Faulkner Taylor's first chat in the group, and that is coming up on June the 5th, June the 7th, and it starts at 6 o'clock. I'll put the event up for that. That's Robert Faulkner Taylor's first monthly one. So Robert's got somebody coming every month for Robert to look at things through a very academic lens for us. So
I loved listening to him.
He's great, isn't he? Oh my God, it's a real treat. Okay, good night, everybody.
Okay,
thanks very much.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, bye-bye.